So you shared this really fascinating set of sources with us today, all diving deep into something called the Universal Declaration of Duties, or UDD.
That's right. It's a philosophical framework presented as a common ideal, actually, and it proposes a pretty different way of looking at things, doesn't it?
It really does.
Wow.
Shifting focus from maybe what we're used to thinking about rights over to active responsibilities or duties.
Exactly.
So our mission here in this deep dive is, well, to unpack that, to look at this duty-centric approach and see how it connects, maybe surprisingly, with something so crucial today, mental health promotion.
Right. We want to pull out the key ideas from the material you've got there.
Yeah, find those practical links, if they exist. Between these, well, they feel like quite old ideas about duty and how we understand psychological well-being now.
Okay, sounds good. Where should we start? Maybe the foundation.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
What exactly is this Universal Declaration of Duties?
Okay, so it's rooted in something called the Dasbien Theory. The sources explain this theory suggests the universe isn't static, it's constantly in motion, dynamic.
Okay, constant motion.
And that real flourishing, what they call good existence, or Dasbien, it comes from the interactions within that motion, interactions that are, well, governed by these duties.
Governed by duties.
Yeah.
And the UDD itself, the declaration, it comes from the three meanings of love in this theory.
That's it. The sources lay them out pretty clearly. First, there's receiving love from others, especially important, they note, when you're vulnerable.
Right.
Second is giving love to your own being. That's, self-care, growth, looking after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And third, giving love to other beings. So family, colleagues, even pets are mentioned, actively creating well-being for them.
So it's a kind of three-way street of love and duty.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And at its core, the UDD defines these duties. Interestingly, not as something you're just born with, like an innate right. More like, the sources call it an artificial nature, intellectual construct, or discovery. Basically, tools. Tools we need.
Tools for what?
For healthy existence as individuals, for living well together, coexistence, and also for, transcending just basic survival.
Right.
Moving beyond.
Okay. And the ultimate goal?
The sources state the teleology, the purpose, is goodness, well-being, and the common good.
Okay, here's the bit that really jumped out at me, and I think might for listeners too. This redefinition of rights as duties.
Yes, that's central. Instead of passively being entitled to something.
Right, like, I have a right to X.
Exactly. The UDD flips it. It reframes it as an active obligation you have. The sources even say, pretty boldly, the only reason not to fulfill a duty is if doing so leads to a greater good.
A greater good. That sounds like it could get complicated.
It probably could. And there's also a primary duty mentioned to balance your duties to yourself, your own well-being, against your duties to the common good.
So, bringing this back to mental health, what are the implications of that shift from rights to duties?
Well, potentially, it's quite significant. It could shift the whole paradigm, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Away from maybe passively waiting for support.
Or expecting external conditions to change.
Right, towards actively cultivating your own well-being. It suggests maybe more intrinsic motivation, more agency for you on your mental health journey.
But it's not just about the individual, is it? You mentioned collective entities, too.
Crucially, no, it's not just individual. The framework explicitly places a mandate on states, organizations, companies.
So institutions.
Yes. A duty for them to actively promote the conditions that allow people to fulfill these duties in the first place. It's a two-way street, systemically speaking.
That makes sense. Okay, so that framing leads us into the specifics. What about the duties towards our being, towards ourselves?
Yeah, the UDD lays these out, and the sources are really direct here. They state, what were once believed to be rights for ourselves are actually duties toward ourselves.
Wow. So not just a nice idea, but an obligation.
Exactly. A fundamental obligation as it's framed. To care for yourself, to grow, to learn, meet your needs.
So how does that connect to concepts we already talk about in mental health? Self-care seems like an obvious one.
Absolutely. The UDD's duty to give love to our own being. That maps almost perfectly onto self-care. But the key difference is the framing.
It's not just bubble baths if you have time.
Right. It's not optional or self-indulgent. The sources frame caring for yourself, growing, learning, meeting your needs as a fundamental duty.
That really does change the feel of it, doesn't it? It makes it proactive, a way to prevent burnout, maybe.
Exactly. And the sources even list specific activities that research backs up, things that fit this duty, like mindfulness or meditation.
Which we know reduces anxiety, depression, rumination.
Right. Physical activity improves mood, lowers cortisol, getting out in nature.
Good for stress, mood, thinking.
Social connection, vital stress buffer, combats loneliness. And the basics: sleep, nutrition, crucial for brain function, mood regulation.
And framing all those well-established beneficial things as duties, it sort of cuts through the hustle culture excuse of not having time for them.
Precisely. It encourages you to consistently engage with them, not just when you feel like it or when you're already crashing.
Okay. What else connects? Self-compassion.
Yes, strongly. That UDD emphasis on giving love to our own being aligns really well with self-compassion.
Yeah.
Being supportive towards yourself, especially when you're struggling.
Not beating yourself up.
Exactly. It involves self-kindness, not harsh judgment. Recognizing that, hey, suffering is part of being human. It connects us. That's the common humanity piece.
Yeah.
And mindfulness, being aware of difficult feelings without getting totally swept away.
And the research backs this up, that self-compassion is helpful.
Oh, absolutely. The research is clear. It's not weakness. It boosts well-being. It reduces anxiety and depression symptoms. It actually fosters intrinsic motivation, wanting to grow for its own sake. And it gives a more stable sense of self-worth than just relying on self-esteem, which can be pretty fragile.
You know, what's interesting there is if you have a duty toward yourself, you're bound to mess up sometimes. Right?
Inevitably.
So maybe self-compassion is almost like the necessary psychological underpinning. Without it, wouldn't that duty just feel like pressure, leading to self-blame if you struggle?
That's a really insightful point. It seems self-compassion would be essential to make these self-duties feel sustainable and supportive, rather than like another stick to beat yourself with. It provides that buffer.
And does this link to other self-duties?
Yeah.
Like potential and responsibility?
It does. The sources mention other duties like realize and develop my potential and assume responsibilities regarding the consequences.
Okay, and how do those map onto psychology?
They connect directly to things like self-efficacy, your belief that you can actually do things, achieve goals, manage challenges.
Right, your confidence in your abilities.
Exactly. And also personal responsibility, taking ownership in your own healing or growth journey. We know high self-efficacy is linked to better coping, better well-being overall.
And low self-efficacy is linked to distress.
Right. And taking personal responsibility, well, it challenges that purely passive disease model view some people have of mental health. It encourages you to develop self-management skills.
But there's a potential downside there too, isn't there? The sources mention this nuance.
Yes, crucially, an overemphasis on just individual duty could lead to self-blame. Blaming yourself for things that are genuinely outside your control, systemic barriers, social inequalities, biological factors.
So you can't just put it all on the individual.
No, and that's where the UDD's broader framework comes back in, especially the collective duties, which we'll get to. The implication is that society, institutions, they have to create supportive conditions. They have a duty to make it possible for you to fulfill your self-duties without being unfairly blamed if you can't.
Okay, that balance seems critical. Let's shift then from duties to self to duties towards other beings, as the sources put it.
Right. The UDD definitely extends duties outwards into relationships, recognizing how interconnected we are.
And there was that interesting line in the sources about fulfilling more duties, granting apparent greatness or superiority. What's that about?
Yeah, it's an interesting phrasing. It doesn't seem to be about ego, though. The context suggests it's linked to your perceived importance in the common good, how much you contribute.
Ah, so it's like an intrinsic reward, feeling valuable because you're contributing.
That seems to be the idea. It hints at that warm glow effect that researchers talk about. Helping others or contributing feels good. It enhances your own sense of value and purpose.
Okay. So how does this focus on duties to others play out for mental health for you and the people around you? Social connection seems key.
Absolutely central. Remember the Dasbien Theory's 3 meanings of love? They included both receiving love and giving love to others, and the UDD spells out duties towards relationships.
And we know social support is huge for mental health.
Huge. It's vital for coping with stress, anxiety, depression. It buffers against loneliness, builds resilience. It's fundamental.
And belongingness, too.
Yes. A sense of belonging, feeling connected, it's not just a nice to have. It's framed as a core evolutionary need. And research strongly links it to mental health, quality of life.
And it's about the quality of connections, not just the number.
Exactly. It's the perceived quality that matters most. Feeling uncertain about whether you belong. That can really negatively impact well-being, even performance in work or school.
So the UDD, by framing engagement in relationships and contributing to others as duties, It kind of gives a philosophical justification for putting effort into building those connections.
You could see it that way, yeah. It encourages deliberate efforts to build social capital, to combat loneliness, seeing it not just as a personal problem, but something we have a collective, duty-based interest in addressing.
Makes sense. What about things like helping others? Prosocial behavior, altruism.
That connects directly to the UDD's stated goal of the common good, and specific duties mentioned like generating well-being for them, for others.
So it actively promotes prosocial behavior, actions that benefit other people or society.
Yes, and altruism too, helping even when it might cost you something. And the sources point out these aren't just abstract ethical ideals, they have measurable mental health benefits.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, for instance, research shows kids who engage in prosocial behavior tend to have fewer emotional difficulties later on. Adolescents who volunteer are less likely to experience poor mental health.
Interesting. Is there a feedback loop?
Yes, there's a well-documented bidirectional link. Happier people tend to help more, and helping others actually makes people happier. That's the warm glow again.
So the UDD framework kind of leverages that by calling it a duty.
It seems to. By framing contributing to the common good as a duty, it normalizes it. It makes that intrinsic reward the warm glow something society encourages, promoting prosociality as a norm for everyone's well-being.
Okay, one more piece in this interpersonal puzzle. Empathy. How does that fit?
Well, the UDD requires generating appropriate and balanced interactions and relationships. You can't really do that without empathy, can you?
Probably not. Understanding where others are coming from.
Exactly. The ability to understand and resonate with their emotions. The sources mention 3 types. Cognitive empathy, just understanding their perspective.
Like putting yourself in their shoes mentally.
Right. Then emotional empathy, actually sharing or feeling their feelings.
Feeling with them.
And then compassionate empathy, which is understanding and feeling, but also being moved to act, to help.
Ah, the action part.
Yes. And empathy is foundational, isn't it? For trust, good communication, strong support networks. It helps reduce stigma around mental health, too, creating safer spaces for people to actually seek help when they need it.
Are there examples of that?
Sure, studies show things like teacher empathy can significantly reduce student stress and make them feel like they belong more at school.
So which type of empathy does the UDD lean towards?
Given its focus on generating well-being for others, it seems to align particularly strongly with compassionate empathy. It's not just about feeling, it's about doing, urging action.
Which would strengthen community support overall.
Precise.
Okay, so we've covered duties to self, duties to others, but the UDD goes bigger, right? Collective duties.
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't stop at the individual or interpersonal level. The sources explicitly state that collective entities, states and their agencies, governments, social organizations, and companies, their ultimate goal is the promotion of duties.
Promotion of duties, meaning what?
Meaning aiming for the well-being of individuals, other beings, and the environment. It's a very clear mandate for collective systemic responsibility.
Wow. So how does that translate into promoting mental health on a larger scale?
Well, one major way is by supporting social cohesion. That collective duty directly fosters it.
Social cohesion, meaning like how connected a community feels.
Yeah, it includes the quality of social relations, people identifying with their place, feeling like they belong, and having a shared orientation towards the common good.
And that matters for mental health.
Hugely. The sources cite research showing that social cohesion in a neighborhood can sometimes impact mental health more than things like economic deprivation.
Really? More than poverty.
In some studies, yes. Because it fosters trust, belonging, mutual support. Things like community engagement, safe neighborhoods, access to green spaces, these are crucial positive factors.
And the flip side.
Adverse conditions, things like forced displacement through gentrification, poor or unsafe housing, they clearly worsen psychological distress.
So the UDD's collective mandate, it basically gives a philosophical grounding for tackling those social determinants of mental health.
Exactly. It legitimizes advocating for policies that build social capital, create inclusive communities, invest in safe environments. It broadens mental health promotion way beyond just clinics and therapy.
Right, into the very fabric of society.
Yes. And this collective effort also ties into resilience building.
How so?
The UDD aims for well-being in its multiple forms and includes that duty to realize potential not just for yourself, but for collective benefit too. This implicitly fosters resilience, the ability to adapt, to bounce back, even thrive when facing adversity.
Resilience is like a protective factor for mental health.
A very powerful one. It's closely linked to well-being, often working together with hope.
And resilience isn't just an individual thing either, is it?
No, not at all. Community-based approaches are vital for collective resilience, especially after shared traumas or large-scale challenges, creating environments of safety, trust, mutual support.
Things like trauma-informed community programs, peer support networks,
Yeah.
accessible services.
All of those. The UDD, with its duties operating at the individual, interpersonal, and collective levels, provides a framework for building resilience on all those fronts simultaneously. It recognizes that your personal capacity to cope is deeply intertwined with and supported by the collective structures and actions around you.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the UDD offers this, well, quite comprehensive framework, doesn't it?
It really does seem integrated. The philosophy of active duties stemming from those three meanings of love, it maps surprisingly well into basic psychological needs, things like relatedness, competence, autonomy.
The duties to self seem to foster individual strengths, self-care, self-compassion.
While the duties to others and the collective build those crucial social connections, encourage prosocial behavior, enhance community resilience.
And that core shift, thinking about well-being through active duties rather than just passive rights. You said earlier it could be empowering.
Potentially, yes, empowering for you as an individual, but also leading to perhaps more engaged communities and more accountable institutions. It fosters a sense of shared responsibility.
But we need that caveat, right?
Yeah.
The source is warned about not letting duty become a way to blame victims.
Absolutely crucial, especially if people's basic needs aren't being met. That's why the UDD's emphasis on collective duties is so important. They're essential to ensure the supportive systems are actually in place, enabling individuals to fulfill their own duties without being unfairly burdened.
And we should also remember this is primarily a philosophical idea at this stage.
Yes, that's important context the sources provide. It's conceptually rich, but it's not like it's a fully tested empirical model with loads of data yet.
So more research is needed.
Definitely. The sources explicitly call for it. Things like longitudinal studies tracking people over time, intervention studies designing programs based on these duty principles, qualitative research understanding how people actually perceive these ideas, and cross-cultural analysis. Does this resonate differently in different places?
And there are ethical questions too, like that greater good justification.
Right. That needs more philosophical digging. What does greater good mean? Who decides? There are complexities there.
So looking ahead, what's the potential application? Where could these ideas go?
The sources suggest quite broad potential, integrating UDD principles into public health policy, into education curriculums, community development programs, even frameworks for corporate social responsibility.
So potentially quite far-reaching.
If pursued, yes. But it would require a lot of collaboration across different sectors and disciplines.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the Universal Declaration of Duties, it really does offer a potentially transformative way to think about well-being.
It seems to. Reorienting towards active duties to ourselves, others, the collective, it provides a pretty robust foundation, going beyond just fixing problems when they arise.
And it lines up so well with things we instinctively feel, or that research shows, are vital. Looking after yourself, connecting meaningfully, contributing something larger.
It empowers you to be proactive in your own well-being, but it also puts the onus on society and institutions to create environments where that's actually possible.
Yeah. This dive into the sources really highlights how framing well-being as something actively cultivated through participation, through contribution, not just received passively, holds real promise. Maybe for a more engaged, resilient, and maybe even more compassionate society.
It's a compelling vision.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, inspired directly by the sources we've discussed. Given this UDD perspective we've explored, what might it mean for you to view mental health not just as something to be passively received or protected, but as something to be actively cultivated through your own conscious participation and contribution?